for my little break with the game Power Struggle 6:15 turn. Not much has changed. Confederates are still attacking along here. Union's still holding pretty well. And more of the 6th Corps is pulling onto the map. I don't think we're going to see much other than the repositioning that's already in the cards and the orders. This is a really odd formation that the Union's taking here. I mean, this is no singular defensive. They've basically circled their wagons and are just, defending against any possible attack in terms of any location that could be hit. They're in a position that they can defend against it. It's actually a problem with this scenario, in my view, with anything that just says, hey, there's one, geographical objective. Well, what you want to do is you kind of want to create something like this, a big hollow defensive circle around it, which is totally unreasonable in terms of some sort of appropriate tactics for this kind of situation. Cemetery Hill is not that important. Cemetery Hill is important because it dominates the roads. Now, the Confederates are going to be in a position where they can take Taneytown Road and cut off this holding of this terrain, whatever the hell that ends up meaning, which is going to make the Union come out and fight. But this position ensures the types of orders that CWB in this game allow for, in particular geographical constraints that are not easily maneuvered around or changed. This allows the best defense against that kind of thing, is build a big ring around the thing you want to defend, because any kind of attempt to write orders that create a more historical line or anything, those can be outflanked fairly easily by the attacker, to tell you the truth. And it is just one problem with the written order systems. At the end of the 6:15 turn, no real change. The real problem here is Longstreet's hitting what really is the strongest point in the Union line now. It wasn't when the orders were written, and it wasn't when he first struck. But falling back here, all the artillery that the Union had collected along these hills here has pushed back to Cemetery Ridge, and it's just decimating him. I wish the orders would stop. I'm not really closing very much at 2 or 3 hexes in general, if you look kind of across the line. But I have my own artillery. Longstreet has a decent quantity, but he's just getting pounded on the front line there. And there's a little bit of counter battery fire on both sides, but for the most part, they're just trying to wipe out the infantry for good or ill. Enough of the guns, especially the Union guns, are within 5 hexes of this area or over here. Actually, they have to find exactly 5 hexes, because within doesn't do very well. Although there was some. This unit's in the way right now, but it wasn't when the fire was taken. There was some canister fired on there. We ran them out of ammo. Union's running real low on canister. At least the Corps, the Army Reserve, still has a decent amount left, in the 40s, I think. But the ammo gets eaten up so fast. Wow. All right, and as 6:30 rolls to an end, you can see the Confederate line has mostly shattered. This long-range sniping, any possible advantage to the attacker, that basically the defender holding steady and the attacker not charging, means the opening volley table isn't in play anymore. So you're just exchanging fire kind of as you do in a CWB style game where both sides fire at the same time. Well, here it's just every other turn, with the fire being a little bit more condensed and more potent. Well, Longstreet's units look like they blinked. Mainly, it's a matter, if you look at the Union, it's a matter of those artillery stiffening the Union line that kept them from being the first to fall back. With Longstreet this beaten up, I think he could safely say he has no chance of completing these orders. Whether I want to or not, well, I don't want to, but whether I want to withdraw or not, I feel like I'm justified in saying, look, my command is decimated at this point. I have no possibility of facing the Union line and taking the objectives listed, which will at least give me the ability to withdraw and maybe not to the locations I want to go. There's some danger here, because I've got orders on all 3 Confederate Corps that they may be under orders as late as midnight. You have no idea, but essentially, actually, 2nd Corps hasn't gotten its orders yet, and it's the most likely to get them. But with Hill and Longstreet both at 0 ratings. Now, Longstreet actually has a better chance of getting these movement ratings, and I haven't been... he's good at breaking off from an attack, actually, and I haven't been taking that into account. I've been just treating it as an attack order. So he should actually be able to achieve his fairly easily. But Hill is more questionable. Hill might end up in a situation where he's in mid-order come midnight. And if that happens, there's a problem, because then I don't get the recovery phase. I don't get any of Hill's troops back. And that would be a real problem. There's a lot of time to midnight, though. We get 6 hours. But nighttime, as is usual in these type of game, in the ESSIG designs, is... compressed. And there goes Longstreet pulling out. He actually got his orders to move, so he's not forced to actually just cancel the order, which means nothing really, because he's going to even if he canceled, he'd recover his orders at midnight. So again, the question comes up, should I be allowed to provide this kind of rear guard in line formation? And in particular, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference, because the artillery can still plunk at the columns and limbered artillery behind, and there's just nothing that I can do about that in the infantry. But the biggie here is I'm providing some protective screen with the infantry if the infantry surged forward somehow. I don't believe they'd be allowed to. I know that they're not allowed to, you know, by my interpretation, because I know the Union orders too. But it's conceivable that the Union has orders that were waiting to be executed, that, you know, they come charging forward immediately. That's actually a situation that's kind of weird. You're never going to see the, I'm going to call it the Hastings maneuver from, you know, the Battle of Hastings. But you're never going to see a force in a CWB. Well, CWB, you might get an initiative roll that does it, but certainly not in an LLB game. Where a line is attacked, stands, destroys the enemy, and then comes back for an immediate counterattack. The only way you could see that is to write orders that essentially happen to just serendipitously take place at the right time, or to, well, in CWB you can get it off initiative, but you can get it here, I guess. You could write orders that don't just occur at the right time, but that are awaiting that situation. So, like, as Longstreet breaks away, charge forward. That would be kind of reasonable, but the units wouldn't be able to undertake them right away unless they got very lucky, because they wouldn't get to roll for acceptance until the event happens. Not really anything against that. I guess the thing I'm most upset about is that these order systems don't cover sort of the involuntary charge, but I don't know how reasonable that would be. So I guess you can simulate what I'm thinking of as is appropriate for the Civil War within the game system. It just might take some time for it to for the attack to get underway, but that's okay. At 7 p.m., Longstreet starts to pull completely out of range of the Union. The artillery can still plink away at those units in column. That's a worthwhile task to do. A few up here that are within fairly close range. Some of it, there may be some line of sight issues, but I think I can see over here, actually. If I want to do some long-range bombardment before night falls. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Really anything beyond 10 hexes, though, I don't like to fire on. For one thing, you don't get any of the rear or column bonuses. But the other is the artillery just starts getting so many shifts against it, and artillery ammo is a limited supply, a very limited supply, it appears. I don't want to, take the shot of maybe causing some more casualties or stragglers, which are the same thing in this game. Although it is a little bit more appealing to do long-range artillery fire here than it would be in CWB, because they are the same thing. So, is that. And more interesting, Hill is beginning to move, and actually a couple of units are rejoining Hill. That's McGraw and McGraw Hill and Davis under Heath. Those have their leaders on them. The leaders were over here in the pool. I think this is never coming in, but whatever. I'll figure out. I'm gonna have to start bagging units soon. I got quite a few skirmishers dead over here. I was not giving them their full defensive benefit. They get a column shift in their favor. So we saw a little bit more casualties on the skirmishers for how I used them than you should. And then, at least during parts of the game, and then some more Deering's battery for Longstreet is coming in there. The Union doesn't have any orders to do anything. The interesting thing is kind of whether this would get off and come around here. It looks like Union 6th Corps has pulled back within the perimeter, which means the Confederates are actually going to be able to engage in the plan that they intended. I did give the Union a slight chance of trying to extend their line here to prevent any kind of expansion like that. But what I'm looking at right now is with Longstreet down here, the Union is going to have to attack tomorrow if the Confederates want to stay on the board. And they are going to try to stay. It's looking, though, like no matter what the Union does, no matter what the results of this battle, the Confederates have taken so many losses that this is, a pretty horrendous loss at Gettysburg, worse than historical probably. The Union Army is a little beaten up, but not bad. We'll see how it operates on the offensive. That's one of the reasons I want to do the next day in the offensive, and I'm not just pulling Lee out, is that I want to see if the Union Army is capable of mounting an offensive, because if it is, essentially this is a major Union victory, as opposed to just, what historically happened, holding the territory. The Confederates pulled out. Now, this may seem like there's the opportunity for less of a Union victory because the Confederates are going to try to defend here. And in game terms, if you're going to follow the game's core victory conditions, if we stopped right now, the Union would kind of have a tie, because the Confederates are deploying enough force on Taneytown that I would say it's not freely accessible anymore. And certainly once Ewell gets down there, or if we'll see, that's going to be much more heavily defended, because remember, Ewell's corps didn't do much today. He made a sort of demonstration in front of Culp's Hill and then pulled back in failure. So we should have some opportunity, at the very least, if the Union, basically what I'm seeing the victory conditions as doing is forcing the Union into an attack to clear their line of supply. If the Confederates can't withstand that, they don't deserve the draw, and I don't think they can. I think the Union Army's in much, much better shape, but we'll see how easily Meade gets it moving. He's not exactly this shouldn't be here. Confederates haven't been firing for a long time. It would disturb me if the Confederates end up being able to fall back down the Taneytown Road and thereby prevent a victory. However, remember, I still keep in mind how battered is the Army. I feel like the Union has some compulsion to try to clear the road. They can't just say, yeah, okay, we won. you know, bye. Except for the fact that maybe Lee should be withdrawing at this point. That's the only that's the only proviso to the whole thing. But yeah, if they can't push the Confederates off Taneytown, that's going to be a problem. I was thinking about this, and you know, the way the command rules are written for this is a little different. So I've been stricter than I would be in CWB. But there are instances, for example, pursue the enemy, that I allow orders like that there's no hint in CWB either that you should be allowed to write those orders. It seems to me that both games were designed with only territorial objectives in mind and for writing your orders. And I feel like there are circumstances where that's just too restrictive for me in CWB, so I've, you know, fudged there. Well, I feel like with experience in this game, I would get more willing to fudge on that as well. I think I'm just kind of, you know, a little shy of doing so because it's a new system. As I finish up the 7:15 turn, you can see not a lot's changed. Longstreet's beginning to organize his line. It takes a couple of turns to get everything in place. If you're under pressure, you don't have time to do it, and that's actually the biggest pain in the ass right now. Is these guys were kind of disorganized because they were in a fight, and I've got units that, you know, had retreated in the wrong direction and ended up in the wrong part of the line, and they're kind of shifting around there. Meanwhile, Hill, you can see several different columns moving, and then these back units. Some of that's Longstreet's artillery there. Did bring to mind one issue, which is, at what point does the Union realize that the Confederates are just going to defend Taneytown Road? When do they realize they have to attack tomorrow? That could be a big factor, and one which kind of leads you to say, well, maybe I can't end the game on the third day if they don't, you know, undertake their attack early in the day. If they wait around and see, you know, the Confederates ain't coming, and we have to try to fill things out. Well, clearly, the battlefield will not be decided by a simple parking along the Taneytown Road. There would, I could see a day going by where the Confederates say, if they park far enough away, not at this distance probably, but where the Confederates are just sitting there and the Union's just sitting there, and the Union says, well, if we're going to hold this position, we have to attack. I don't know how that'll work out and what we'll see there. It could mean lots of turns where nothing happens, and then me deciding it goes an extra day. CWB's Thunder at the Crossroad covers the ability for a fourth day. Usually you don't need it, because usually the Confederates are attacking pretty powerfully throughout the entire game. Here I don't feel like the Confederates have the ability to launch another attack unless it's a counterattack after a failed Union attack on their position. So we'll see. And Ewell's Corps starts moving, making their way down. You can see Hill is almost in position now. I probably have way too small a frontage in a sense, but as far as I'm concerned, I got one thing to handle in this game, which is control of, I'm not quite sure where Ewell's going actually. Taneytown Road 9.45. That could be dangerous. Yeah, that's 9.45? 9.45 is this hill. Oh no, to stream. Okay. So he's supposed to drop a line coming through here, which won't be all that thick. But you can see Hill doesn't really need to cover too much. He's trying to protect this Millerstown Road that he's taking right now. And I'll extend that as far as need be, at least to the edge of the ridge there. Longstreet has a little curve here he doesn't need. Maybe I'll sidestep all those units. I don't know. We'll see, because Ewell's supposed to come up to this position. So I've got a lot of, you know. Anyway, with all that density, I'm really just trying to protect this one roadway. So I want the most force possible there. If the Union launches an attack, I really want to hold that. It's not great terrain, but I can fall back indefinitely as far as I can see. Well, there's an edge to the map. What an odd battle if it ends up coming down to the Confederates being pushed to the edge of the map in the south. Very much not Gettysburg so far. Even with all that scripting, the scripting actually helped to cause some of the issues. Anyway, this is 7:45, and we'll be going to the Union turn as soon as I take care of this artillery that I forgot about. But I understand why we switch here from the 7 o'clock not doing this to this. It's because the daylight changes, and the daylight changes rather regularly. And then when we get here, we're in the dark without having to worry about the incremental changes. Remember, when a day break comes or night falls, changes happen rather quickly in terms of the lighting conditions. So they wanted to extend it out and make sure that all those show up. To me, it's kind of an inelegant solution. I would rather see a counter on this normal track and then just switch between the two tracks instead of this period where we're not on either track. It feels funny as hell to me to do that. And I was wondering why that decision was made. Now, a little bit of reflection on the chart, I understand why, but I can't say I'm thrilled with it. All right, we hit 8:15. See, you will bring his forces through here. 3rd Corps Hill beginning to assemble, along with the artillery coming back. It's going to be really dense, at least in this section, and maybe over here too. Something I meant to mention before, and I don't remember if I did or not, and I don't tend to look back to see. But I know it happened to me pretty significantly a couple of pieces last turn and another this time, and I've mentioned it before. Randomizing the strength points of units by, oops, you know, I bump it and I'm picking up units, counter flips, who knows what happens, you know, something like this. Normally you got 1 or 2 strength points that it could be, and quite often it's, you know, obvious which one it can't. But here, whoops, I got no idea. You know, obviously I'm not throwing pieces from that height, but I drop a piece and I'll see a strength on there that can't possibly be true, and I've got no idea what it was anymore. It's impossible to remember it. This type of counter is just bullshit in terms of, you know, any kind of accuracy, but it does save some effort. There's no question there. And I'm a lazy man, so I'm willing to accept that, hey, you know, Benning's thing could have been, his regiment could have been an 8 strength unit, and now it's a 1. It had been an 11. I got no idea what it was. It seems unlikely. Well, I've had a couple more instances like that. Nothing as dramatic as that, where I have no idea if I just lost 7 strength points, you know, out of nowhere, or not, you know. I just have no idea. 30, and the river gets a little tricky down here. You can see it's a solid border. That's impassable, so I gotta find myself a ford, or I can cross it down here. It becomes easier to cross once again over here. It's just one area where it's really nasty, and the Union was covering mainly that area, a place where I wouldn't want to cross anyway. As we hit 9:30, I do stupid things. I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot of them, but I wanted to point out one here. I took sort of the northernmost guys and took them through the ford, and now everybody else is kind of, actually that was this set. Everybody else is kind of stuck either with the, I gotta cross their line, which is impossible, or wait for them to get through, or else head down south. Now here it's not so bad if you take a look at the terrain, but here there's some extra forests that are going to make things kind of more unpleasant. I could have crossed the northernmost guys up here, taken a 2nd column through here and a 3rd column through here. I hope it doesn't make these guys be moving at midnight, because we are getting kind of close. They're half-hour turns, but so we're on this track now instead of just here. So it's kind of hard to visualize and understand immediately. Am I going to make it or am I not? If I don't, it's going to really suck, because I could really use those extra troops. One reason I can't go to a 4th day in this game is the idea of recovering strength doesn't really make too much sense in line of battle. So, for example, if the Confederates just park here, I don't think I can just if the Union doesn't get actions to try to drive them out of the way, I don't think I can just write it off and say, yeah, let's go to a fourth day and see what happens. Because everybody will recover strength that they presumably lost during day 3, but if there is really not enough fighting in day 3 to account for that, it's not going to make much sense. I really don't like the keeping track of stragglers and casualties in the same value, and just, you know, it just really disturbs me. Conceivably, if you decide day 2 wouldn't be a good idea to fight on, the Confederates could set themselves up and just recover their strength and hit on day 3 with full strength units, if that makes more sense for them. Just because they'll be recovering 25% of their strength each night. There are just weird things that can be done with this system that couldn't be done with the old CWB. The old CWB, you saw Murfreesboro had a big 2-day gap in it. You'd have to make up special rules to make it work under this system, because the recovery, you know, would be greater than it should be. You'd be able to recover real casualties instead of just stragglers. There's just a lot that kind of concerns me about that kind of stuff. Now, as I finish up the Confederate side of the 10 p.m. turn, and I can flip that up. My tea's almost done. I noticed Stuart's supposed to come on, so I look up the orders for him. He comes in Area E. Not a lot comes in from there. He's supposed to go over. He goes over to Lee. He's got orders 28 over there. Go to Lee, get dressed down. Each Confederate player is allowed to give the gay cavalier a slab of his mind, then remove Stuart from play. Great. You know, it's cute to have a joke like that, and it does give you the possibility of using Stuart. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you his cav, which, not as an option or anything. Presumably some C3I magazine, or no, not C3I, Operations is, I think, what the gamers use. I can't remember, but it is C3I's GMT's game magazine. I'll come up with some, hey, what if Stuart was present at the battle? Give rules that may improve the Lee option, and also throw some of his cav on the field for whatever value they might provide on the battlefield itself. There's not much more. The big thing would be giving Lee an advantage, maybe letting him, you know, be released from all his restrictions on the first day. Anyway, we're pretty much cutting it close here, but as far as I'm concerned, the Confederates have actually achieved what they need to in terms of meeting the requirements for having gotten Ewell's Corps into place. They've set up most of the defensive line. It's 11 p.m. at this point, and, well, they got 2 more turns. They'll be almost entirely set up by that point. I don't know if everything's going to make it. Things like O'Neill and stuff, I'm planning on putting Rhodes's division back here for the most part. But the orders are pretty much in place. The only question is where I want to lock up Ewell himself down. And this looks like a pretty decent place. I'll probably put him back with this house. I like putting my commanders in houses because they tended to do that. I noticed I forgot about Lee. I had him back here. He had orders starting at 9:15 to start moving down around here as well. Text 2131 is where he's supposed to lock in, which I think is somewhere down here, actually. Probably this house. He may not be there by midnight, but that's okay. He's not allowed to write orders, so that's no big deal. Meade's allowed to write orders, and I'm planning on writing some, because as the Confederate position is starting to develop, it seems clear to me that Meade is going to want to move some of his army. Notably, the stuff up here, he can swing it around. Not attack orders necessarily, but a broader reach, just so that he's able to engage on the flanks if he needs to. Whether or not I'm going to launch something with 12th and 11th coming around this side, I don't know. I don't really like the idea of giving up the defense of Cemetery and Culps in case something horrible starts to happen. I kind of want to be up there, but I may write orders to switch the orientation, and that'll let me dig some more breastworks. I have a few more left. I got to get some of these guys into bags, and I can abandon some of the ones facing northward because they're really not serving any purpose. Maybe dig in along here too. I only have 15 of them total though. It's time for the big move into day 3. We see most of that line set up. We saw that before. I've got the hard task of running through all of these units, putting them back on the board at reduced standing, setting up all the other units and increasing their strength a little bit, and then writing orders for Meade's army. He's going to have a number of things to do. I don't know how many I'm going to take. I've got to decide how aggressive I want to be with this flank, really. Whether I want to swing around. No matter what, I think we're going to see 1st and 3rd swinging their way out. The question is, okay, do I pull 2nd out too and try to really cut off that Confederate line, because there are still reinforcements that are coming in. The Union doesn't really know about that terribly well. They know there's forces around, I'm sure. They've got their cav in place, unlike dumbass Stuart. See, I did my job. But yeah, it looks to me like if we're worried about rolling up the Confederate line, this is the hanging flank that maybe I can get some additional pressure against. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load this one up, even though it's a little early, just so that I have that. It's at the end of the 2nd day. The 1st day I don't know, I played it out until like 3:30 in the morning or something like that. And it kind of skews my results. I'd rather let people see the first, a day and end it at about a day. Although nothing's really happening at night. So you know what? The hell with it. We'll make this one of them hour-long videos too. And just push it into the next morning. I really hate wasting, making another video if I can avoid it for whatever reason. And yeah, nothing's going to happen. So the only problem is some of the most interesting stuff I think on the 2nd day happens on this video. And I'm not positive, but I think that's the case. The whole kind of failed Longstreet attack is definitely on here. I don't know how much else was. Maybe I'll eat up this remaining half hour or so. So what's weird is, unlike normally where there's a nice line, the Confederates have a decent line I can follow and build and rebuild their units on it with no problem. But the Union, I look at this mess here, this weird shape. What I'm going to do is a spiral coming around, over, and then in around here, and just run through the units that way. That way I'll be able to keep better track of them and do their straggler recovery that way. Here are the losses. I've covered everything up here that was already damaged. That was still on the map. These have to be now hunted down. In many cases, they've got leaders that have to be placed as well. Try to figure out where the hell everything goes. But I was just kind of amazed by the amount of casualties there are. Some of these are really big units, good units, whatever. It gives you kind of a breakdown of where the fighting is going. Hill's corps is really beaten up from this. Longstreet not so bad actually. Some good units gone, and obviously Ewell had a lot of resting time. For the Union Corps, you can see the 2nd Corps did the majority of fighting. 3rd Corps here. 11th still beat up from the fighting they took early in the day. And then these are mainly my sharpshooters here, although we got like a supply wagon that's out and Stuart. I'm gonna bag the things that can't come back in and start putting putting the other pieces on. This is one hell of a task overall. Probably through the bigger part of it. There's a lot more units on the board that were damaged than I've got to do here, but I've still got to hunt down where these commands are and, you know, the individual units, and try to find places for all these new little wrecked units that they can be of some use, perhaps. After that rather painful setup, you can see some relatively big stacks of what amounts to crap have shown up. The Union midnight turn, and almost nothing's moved. Some of the Confederates shifted position a little bit. Oops, that doesn't move yet. And there's not a lot more that's going to be happening tonight. The Union movement was primarily a set of movement orders, shifting. You don't have to write these orders. You could do these on initiative, but I feel like Meade wants to ensure that they happen, and initiative may not ensure that, but he wants 11th Corps and 12th Corps to shift their defenses southward to face the new situation. And these all trigger at 3:45. That's the beginning of sort of the false dawn and all that. I looked it up. This is the first twilight turn. These are considered night, these dark turns, I guess. It does say night with full moon. It doesn't say anything really about twilight, but there's this EENT and BMNT. I'm assuming the T in there is twilight. I don't know. But I looked it up, and it seems to indicate the twilight turn should be shaded. Not how much. The other movements I've done, ordered at least. 2nd Corps is supposed to stretch out as far as Spangler's Woods. 3rd Corps is going to run from Spangler's through Pitzer's and then down Pitzer's Run over there. And then 1st Corps, all the way over here, is going to continue that movement running down Willoughby Run, getting us in a big outflank. Now, I considered the possibility of moving 6th Corps in a similar outflank running this way, but you know what? This river is just too painful. I don't want to fight my way through the river. The problem is, though, where I need to get eventually is going to be Taneytown. If the Confederates oblige me by attacking, which they're not going to, that will allow, you know, 6th Corps can come streaming, and it's very healthy and you know, in almost perfect condition. In fact, I think it's in perfect condition. Hasn't taken a single shot, or if it did, it recovered it. 5th Corps is not in terrible condition and is also centered right on that Taneytown Road. So I could launch an attack with those two, but that's not a very convenient attack or a very effective looking attack. That's where the strength of the Confederate line is. Of course, it's right on the Corps boundary, which could be a good or a bad thing. It's hard to tell. In general, I think it's good for the Confederates. Whereas this big outflank that may just roll up the entire Confederate army, well, that's facing poor Hill back there, but he's so far from anything of any importance, and he can just fall back up to, say, the Round Tops and just further strengthen the Confederate position. So it would be really pleasing if I could outflank to this side, but that river is just too painful. So my hope is that the Confederates launch an attack, because I don't want to launch an attack against a fairly prepared Confederate position. They can't entrench in this game, though. Alrighty. Basically nothing to do. We jumped ahead to 2 a.m., where the Confederates got another unit of the Stonewall Brigade, and the Union got to build their entrenchments through here. I had to pull some of them off Culp's Hill area. I figured that's impossible. You know, there's no way the Confederates are going to be making an attack from the north on Culp's Hill given this situation the next day. Is it possible? Yeah, maybe conceivably, but reorienting your entire line just seems like such a difficult thing to do, and Culp's is not the best place to attack. I could see an attack maybe launched against north of Cemetery, which hits part of Culp's, but this is your goal for the game, right? Anyway, probably be pushing right ahead to the 345 turn where the Union's going to be getting its chances to undertake orders, because I cannot see anything else worth doing. And as that 345 turn starts, Second Corps got its orders and begins pushing forward, and First Corps also got its orders. Third Corps has not yet accepted them, so they're kind of standing still. I wanted to talk a little bit, just a teeny bit, about something I'm not sure about here, not rules-wise, but effectiveness-wise. I've got Rhodes's division as sort of a second rank to the entire, to the entire Ewell's Corps. And I'm not sure how effective that's going to be, nor how effective that second rank so far behind is. Obviously, I can shift it up a little bit if need be. But my feeling is that you don't want units right behind each other, although I've got that here, but those are just artillery in the back. Having artillery in the front or back is fine because they can all route through each other perfectly well. I may have cheated early in the game and had some of the Union artillery causing problems or having problems caused with them by route throughs. They really don't. They kind of are able to stand and watch the infantry route, and the infantry is certainly able to watch the artillery route. The only difference is the artillery is affected by infantry retreats because of the Cowardly Lakes markers. They, I believe, are affected by those, but they don't generate them. Anyway, I think I want to be a little closer, but you don't want to be a double line, because if it's all infantry, because infantry will run through infantry, it'll cause route throughs, it'll cause all kind of problems. So you got to make channels and stuff like that if you're doing that. I think, you know, something like this makes sense, although I should be pushed a little further forward. Problem is I don't want to get in the way of my gun headquarters. It just gets to be crowding and annoyance more than, you know, it's not, there's no game factor against it. And over here on the Third Corps, I have almost a mess in terms of what's behind the lines, just because of all the big units that are big piles of little units that got stacked back there, and I don't know what the hell to do with them. They'll provide some sort of stopgap, you know, backstop, whatever you want to call it, if there's a breakthrough. But again, not the most effective, I think, way to defend. However, the Union's obviously moving and preparing for an attack, and the Confederates are going to have to consider, you know, some roles here as they see the Union deploy. They don't know that the Union's not actually got attack orders at this point. Anyway, that puts us on to, what, 4 a.m. I don't know when this scenario ends. That was what I meant to look up. And you know what, that's in the scenario book, which I don't have available easily. So I'll look that up. But if it has, say, a fixed ending at, say, like 5 p.m. on the third day, I'll take that if the fighting's done. But I'm going to play it till the fighting's done. If there's a fixed ending even, you know, past twilight, if the fighting keeps going at night, I'll keep pressing that attack and seeing whether, at least if there's any chance that it can win the scenario. I am not going to call it because of artificial constraints of the scenario line. Everything's not absolutely set yet. We'll be moving more Union units, but Smith, who has been allowed to be off board acting as Early's reserve unit, is finally coming on the board in a particularly inopportune location up here. I figure I was counting on the stuff coming in from A for pickets, but I forgot to look to see this. This has an interesting set of orders too. It doesn't make sense to me. Smith's brigade can enter and be assigned to Early's or Johnson's division as the player desires. Okay. Tanner must return to Jones's battalion. Optional, allow the 31 VA to return. Okay. So when we look at this, 31 VA isn't included in this. Now, I think it's simply withdrawn. It's not going to show up at the battle is all. But Tanner isn't mentioned there, nor anywhere. Oh, yeah, he comes in here. Nor anywhere else that I see. So obviously a battery. It may be one. It says under Jones. The gun that I withdrew from the game was from Jones, but it's green, not Tanner. I really don't know who Tanner is, whether he's, you know, he's just in the orders. He's not actually in the reinforcements. So I'll look in the other battles, see if he shows up there. But it looks like there's some kind of typo in place. And I don't know where the counter would be. Listed here, but this is on the one map scenario. I think, I don't know, one or two map. One day, first day map only for the 2-map mini campaign. For whatever reason, the first day map only for the 2-map mini campaign contains reinforcements running out to July 3rd. It contains this with Tanner's battery on here. Perhaps this battery is somewhere on the board and I've lost track of it. Perhaps it's not. I do not see it there. I'm going to make sure it's not the one that was withdrawn, because if where was this supposed to come in on this scenario? And 2168. It could just be something that was kicking around and getting rearmed somewhere. I don't know where the hell it is or what's up with it. I'll look in the counters that I withdrew from the game again, see if there's a Tanner. I don't see a Tanner here. I don't know what the hell's up. Not under Jones's battery. I'm going through every goddamn gun in the game. Well, I was able to find it. Green was removed back here. Tanner was removed somewhere else. I found it and lost track. Here it is, back at 6 p.m. on day 1. I don't know how he ended up in the bag. He wasn't the one. Green was the one who was kicking around back here. Given that he shows up on the other scenario, I had to bring him in. I have no idea what strength he was at. I set him at 3, figuring, you know, with 2 days though, he's probably full strength if he had taken any damage. So we'll put him up to 4 guns. It's not going to make a big difference there. It's only one factor. Unlike the, you know, rather random cases where 5 to 8 factors may be being added or subtracted from a unit without me knowing. Well, 5 to 7. Yeah, I have no idea what happens with those little stupid counters with all the numbers on them. They do make life easier in general, though, and I wouldn't play without them, I think, because I'm fucking lazy. But if you want accuracy and you want your numbers to stay the same, they are not a good solution. However, I can cope with them largely. I probably have only made about 4 or 5 major possible errors with them. Alright, anyway, it's time for the Union to start moving. We got this little thing trickling down. Okay, and that's the end of 4 a.m. We're at 4:15. You can see Union 3rd Corps has started moving as well. First is stretching out quite far. Second, they've moved up to the woods, and basically they're at the extent of what they're going to do. They might push forward a little bit more, make more of a bulge. 5th Corps is having trouble covering that, but 2nd can kind of fill in the gaps. They've got some extra units that they can shift around as need be. I don't want to get too close. I don't believe I can get within sort of 5 hexes, so I'm getting pretty close. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So think I'll be moving a little bit further, but not much. Now, I think, what else? Lee can issue orders. I don't know if it's now or when he's allowed to start issuing. The problem is I don't have much for him to do. Look at his long nights. Lee can't issue orders at night on July 1st until 8 a.m. on July 2nd. Okay, so he can't even issue orders yet. Which is actually even longer. Look, this second. Oh, wait. Let me see how that's written. Cannot issue until 8 a.m. on the 2nd, and cannot issue orders at midnight on July 2nd. Okay, so I think he's allowed to issue orders because we're in the twilight stage. At the very least, he would be able to very soon because we're at full dawn. But he doesn't have anything he really wants to do. He's in the defensive position he wants to be in. The only difference is he has some changes he wants to do with Hill's forces, but I don't see those as being really his concern. I should be considering moving Hill's forces, and I'll try to remember to do that before I get hit. As dawn breaks, well, real dawn, 11th Corps switched their orientation mostly. They're still facing out this way, but they've shifted facing south off of Culp's Hill. And then the 3 Corps, I didn't do anything with 2nd Corps, but I'm not sure what to do with them, really. I'm probably going to detach these units and shift them into a second line. I might do that right now. But the 2 moving corps, 1st and 3rd, are getting themselves into position where they're going to end up eventually. I don't, there's not a lot going on, but I kind of like to capture these broad movements. They're sort of the most exciting part of the game for me. I think I've mentioned this before, to kind of visualize, not men in column, but the forces on the grand tactical map, watching them deploying into a new position, watching that. The Confederates successfully, Pender got his initiative and refused their flank. That's all they needed to do here. So that'll make it a little harder. Whether or not Meade's ready to declare an attack, he hasn't given the Confederates a real chance to attack yet. But at some point or another, as my troops get into position, I'm going to have to start considering whether or not I want to launch one. The problem is I can't do anything by time. I can't say, 2 hours after you get this or something. It's got to be based on an event. So one flank or another is going to start the battle. I'm probably going to start it, and I probably should have just written it into my orders, with the 1st Corps, then the 3rd Corps, then the 2nd Corps, and just bring them in down the line in echelon that way. Because the lowest risk is really on the outflank. That's the place where those guys are not really helping me defend Cemetery Hill. The problem, of course, there is I got Pickett coming in, and he's going to be coming in behind them. How much they know that, man, I never know how much to represent that. When I used to play minis, sometimes the designer of the scenario would keep that information, usually would keep that information hidden from the different players. He might give a couple turns warning. You see some clouds of dust on the horizon, there's troops coming, and you're not absolutely even sure that they're the enemies. It's possible, there's an outflanking force of yours out there that you as some sub-commander aren't completely aware of. Maybe the commander didn't pass that information on to you or whatever. And that's always kind of interesting in that kind of situation. So there's plenty of time for it to develop and for me to see those forces coming. There's not plenty of time, though, for me to write my orders based on it. Players knowing the scenario, players knowing Gettysburg at all, will know Pickett's coming in, and he's coming in from way back there. The Union Army is probably aware that there are still some troops, forces having some action back there. So you could look at this many different ways, I guess. It's TSS, but it may be Thunder. One of the games has Doubleday's Corps kind of bumbling in. He always comes in from here with some orders that kind of make it so that he might end up with a surprise attack that ends up kind of dual surprise. Both sides are shocked as he blunders into combat. I always found that kind of enjoyable, and that's almost what I'm setting up here, not entirely intentionally. I've sort of been ignoring the fact that those troops are there. But depending on how the Confederates handle things, those troops could blunder into the rear of the Union force, and then it comes down to who can make better initiative rolls. Well, Pickett's a pretty good commander, so he probably wins that initiative situation. Might actually be able to get some rear attacks and screw up any kind of Union plans down here. On the other hand, as the Confederates are approaching, the Union can try to set up some kind of defense. Certainly a brigade is no problem whatsoever, but the question is, can I get a whole division to screen each of these corps, basically? That may be the necessary factor. I've got extra units, there's no question of that. Second Corps here, has a ton of extra units, which, with a little bit of judicious initiative, rules bending, I could say, yeah, they're all in place. The Union really has to kind of worry about its orders too. Things like this. Not Sickles here, he should be moving. Things like these regular artillery, they're really hard to move on their own. I may make up some attachment rules again for this scenario to allow them to attach to an offensive action, because artillery are really powerful on the attack in this game, and if all of those special Union artillery units are just kind of stuck there waiting on their own orders, they're not going to be terribly effective in terms of supporting an attack. So Meade may be starting to write orders for them very soon. He's going to be very busy as he prepares for the possibility of an attack, at least. Still of where we are at the beginning of 445. Meade has started writing those orders. He wrote it to one of the volunteer artillery. Basically, each turn he's going to write an artillery order. He probably should have done this on the overnight, but given that the Confederate forces aren't moving, I feel like I want to at least prepare for the possibility of an assault, because it looks like the Confederates are planning on sitting where they are. Anyway, we can see the forces as they advance. Third and even First Corps over here are beginning to deploy a little bit. Basically, this is close to the line that I envisioned. It doesn't really present the threat that it first looked like it would, because of the Confederates being able to refuse that flank. There's going to be some ugly fighting in here if there's an attack, though. Anyway, I got to figure out, I'm probably going to dispose the horse artillery over to the Second Corps as my next action this turn. And meanwhile, the Confederate couple extra units are pulling their way down. I don't know how much fighting we're going to see today. I'm fine not doing much. I've played the system out enough that I have a pretty good feel for the game. The only thing that I would regret is kind of if the Union doesn't get to attack sufficiently in order to see whether or not they can break the Confederate line where it is. Well, 5 a.m. comes. I'm gonna go back to the normal track. That'll be pleasant to not have to deal with the individual turns on the track. That's weird to me. And meanwhile, Confederate forces approaching the lines, and the Union First Corps deploying. Third Corps almost completely deployed at this point. We'll see how that all turns out, but we're gonna there's definitely going to be a deeper flanking than maybe I first envisioned. These, you know, these corps are pretty big, and I try to look at what kind of frontage they're going to cover, and I always estimate it wrong, but I left some leeway in my orders, letting the 3rd Corps go down Willoughby Run to some extent, or I'm sorry, down Fitzer Run, and 1st Corps to go down Willoughby Run, so we can kind of head deep down this way. And well, that's all for the good as far as I'm concerned, because I'd like to see the attack launched that further in a flanking type of maneuver, if and when I get around to actually launching it. It's going to take forever for those orders to get all the way down here. Well, forever's a long time, right? The worst it is 3 extra turns beyond the 2 for Meade, which is the best that Lee can do. 5:15, and we're seeing sort of final deployments coming out around here without any new orders being issued. Meade wasn't able to get an order roll. It's been 2 turns in a row he hasn't gotten one, and it's not a good sign. You know, I want to get the preconditions in place that I probably should have set up at midnight, but I feel like that will serve as kind of a break on my idea of, well, I should attack, because, you know, quite honestly, Meade doesn't know that the Confederates aren't going to attack, and he would love them to attack. But the fact that he would love them to attack probably means they wouldn't. If I was sitting on the Union side, chances are I would have written attack orders at midnight, thinking, you know what, this is clearly a defensive position the Confederates are taking up here. As we pull into the 6 a.m. turn, I think we're at about the end of this video. It's taking the time it's supposed to, and although it's taken a lot of game within it and playtime too as well, but not a lot of discussion. 1st Corps established now there, 3rd Corps pretty much set up. I don't have the guns unlimbered for 1st Corps. I'm pretty much coming to the conclusion that I'm going to have to launch an attack. Meade has managed to arrange one of the volunteer artillery and the horse artillery to have orders to associate. Only one thing succeeded in getting its orders out of the bunch. Maybe there's 2 volunteers that have been given orders. Once I get all the artillery orders that are assigned, once Meade allocates all those, I'm going to start launching the attack first from the 1st Corps, then over to the 3rd, then to the 2nd, and just work my way down an echelon to try to smash through, the goal being Taneytown Road. I'm going to probably leave 12th Corps and 11th Corps. I haven't been rolling for 12th Corps. They're supposed to redeploy southward. I've been ignoring them. Oh well. I'm probably going to leave them back at the hills as a sort of reserve. Worst comes to worst, I can order them to do some sort of cleanup. I might be making orders like a pursue order in this case. I feel like the Union not only wants to capture the road, but to drive the Confederate forces away from it without too much concern for the terrain they're moving towards. I don't know how legitimate this is. You know, I do these kind of things in CWB, and I don't think they're any more legitimate there in terms of fitting the exact cookie cutter that the orders are supposed to follow. But I find that by adding, you know, my feeling as to, yeah, there should be this, there should be that, I end up with a game that I'm happier with in general. The problem is, if and when, and I have played these opposed a couple of times, that I do so, that becomes a little problematic, especially if it's not with someone who's an old buddy, as it always has been, that I can kind of explain the rules, explain what my feeling is. If it's someone who's familiar with these games and comes with a different take, damn, I got no idea how to cope with that, you know. I mean, obviously we'd have to hash it out, but It's one of the reasons I guess I kind of like playing with people who don't know the games ahead of time. Because I can explain what my reasoning is for my house rules, and they're usually fairly accepting of them. They might, as in the case of Empires in Arms, when I played that, look at the rules and say, hey, this is ridiculous. You can't do it this way. And, you know, mixed views on that after the fact. Often some of them are willing to accept my interpretation better than they were when they just read it. But with this, you know, there's so much leeway. Anyway, we'll send this one up. 5:45, third day.